Hi, back again, probably for my final video 13 in this series, in this theology that we've been exploring. And for anybody who's interested, I would encourage you to go in and start at video 1 and watch right up to video 13 and pick up the threads for yourself. Of course, you do that through the Spirit. You can't do it any other way. So this is probably my final video. It's going to be the wrap-up on this particular section of videos. I need to go in and study the millennial. I need to go in and study the last 3.5 years of the wrath of God. And that takes quite a bit of time, and I have other responsibilities as well. So I will check in on this channel from time to time. I will tell you that probably in a few weeks I'll dismantle the comment section, unless there's a lot of traffic going on, and in the meantime, if there's comments that I feel I need to respond to, I will. But as of right now, this will probably be my last video in this series of 13. I consider it a body of work on this current theology that I'm teaching. And so for today, we're just going to look at one final portion of interest that the Spirit has led me to. And that was this covenant of lilies that we really haven't discussed much about. And when we go to Abraham, when we go to the Abrahamic covenant, which we find in Genesis 15:9, you'll find 5 animals there that's spoken of. And one's the heifer, one's the she-goat, one's the ram, one's the turtle dove, and one's the pigeon. Well, 3 of those creatures are feminine. And we know that this actually represents the promise of Christ, the Redeemer, which is representative of the ram. And yet, here we have a heifer and a she-goat. Those are the ones we're going to deal with right now. In view, and nobody questions, well, what is that all about? So the one that we're going to look closely at is the she-goat. And these are actual covenants, individual covenants in them of themselves. And the way that we run out this puzzle of the she-goat and of each of these animals is to look up the word she-goat and everything that springs out of those passages that would lead us to more clues as to who these she-goats is. So here we have a she-goat identified. Well, guess what? In Song of Songs, chapter 1, the Shulamite shepherds this little flock of she-goats. And as you read on, we come to the understanding that they're called the daughters of Zion. That's what they're identified as, this flock of she-goats. And in chapter 2 of Song of Songs, we have the lily come into view. And this is the bride speaking. Verse 2, I am the rose of Sharon, the lily of the valley. So this is why they're called the lilies of the covenant, or the covenant of the lilies. And you find that covenant that nobody speaks of. In all my years of attending church, I don't remember anyone on the pulpit ever speaking about the covenant of the lilies. It's just not something that we know about. It's not something that we identify in the scriptures, because it's really very deep. And only when you start digging into the words and every little passage do you discover it. And you'll find it referenced, this covenant, in these passages. And I'm just going to go through it briefly. These are the passages you'll find it mentioned in 1 Kings 7:26, 2 Chronicles 4:5, Psalm 45:1, Psalm 69:1, Psalm 80, Psalm 60, Hosea 14:5, and in all the songs, chapter 2:1, 2:2, 2:16, chapter 4, verse 5, 5, verse 13, 6, verse 2, 6, verse 3, 7, verse 2. And then it speaks of the glory of Zion, which is in Isaiah 35, 1-2. And the reason why that passage is important, because it brings up the word rose, which is what we see here. I am the rose of Sharon, the lily of the valley. And all the same terminology in verse 2 of locations and whatnot, you find in Song of Songs. So you can draw your connections there. But we found a very odd connection here, and it takes us back to the daubing of the wall. believe it or not. And it takes us back to the Eastern Gate, or the Golden Gate, as it's called. And so if you pull it up on Wikipedia, just punch in Golden Gate and put in brackets Jerusalem, and it'll pull this information up. So this is where I got my information from, Wikipedia. And this Eastern Gate, or this Golden Gate, goes also by Beautiful Gate. It goes by Gate of Eternal Life. It goes by Mercy Gate. So these are the many titles of it. And it's called the Shushan Gate. Well, Shushan means lily. So it's called the Lilie Gate. And it was recognized as the gate that the divine presence, or the Shekinah glory, appeared through. This was the gate for the glory. Now we've identified the glory as she. And we've presented our case. I'm not going to debate it. I'm not going to argue it. You either accept it based on the information presented, much like you would present a case in the courts, or you reject it. I'm not here to debate this theology. I'm here to present it to you. And you can go do your own homework on it. If you have a legitimate question, that's fine, but I'm not going to get into any big arguments with anyone on this. So it's called the Lilie Gate, the Shushan Gate. I'm probably not saying it right. But this is what the Jews says. According to Jewish tradition, the Shekinah, or the divine presence, used to appear through the Eastern Gate and will appear again when the Anointed One comes. Now, we've been talking about the daubing of the wall. All right? And we show you why Solomon daubed that wall up. It was to keep out the righteous daughters of Israel. To keep out the glory, as they were called. And you'll find there's a reference all through the Word of God, if you are willing to open your eyes and see it. But most of the time with this indoctrination, this Baal worship that we really have hidden under the current guise of current theology, most we're taught not to see it. We're really taught to ignore the feminine in scriptures and really not go looking for it because, oh, well, you know, you're bad if you do that, you know. So how did this gate get sealed up? Well, it says, okay, in this passage it says the sealing of the gate. Again, this is Wikipedia that provides us information on the Golden Gate, Jerusalem in brackets. And it says this: closed by the Muslims in 810, reopened in 1102 by the Crusaders. It was walled up by Saladin after regaining Jerusalem in 1187, and the Ottoman Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent rebuilt it together with the city walls, but walled it up in 1541, and it has stayed that way until today. So it's still daubed up. It's still walled up. Now, based on the theology that I've been showing you, how the Spirit of Truth, which is represented by the daughters of Zion, that comes into existence in the end of days, representing the Spirit of Truth, Christ's Spirit of Truth, which makes us acceptable unto God in the new heavens and the new body. These principles, we're not going on old principles. You know, an old vessel can't hold new wine. They're appointed in the end of days to rise up. And we've talked about the daubing of the wall, how David left this gate open for these daughters of truth, represented by every tribe in Israel. But these daughters, these particular group of daughters, were responsible for writing the law, or dispensing the law and teaching it to the body, that makes us holy and acceptable unto God. And without that teaching, those principles that are taught to the daughter by Mother Yahweh, we are not acceptable in the heavens. And that's what was rejected in the very beginning, and we discussed all that, so I'm not going to go through it. But as these daughters passed through this wall, this gate, that David had seen to leave open, showing the righteous spirit entering into the body, which is represented by Judah, the spirit by Israel. So we have male and we have female. Though the larger picture is one of Israel, female, that was set apart. We see Adam doing that to her. He sets her out. He doesn't want a covenant with the righteous spirit anymore. And set apart means to be made holy. She's called mother of all living, so she's life. And he makes a covenant with that whore spirit who promised to make him a god in the earth. And that came by way of Baal worship, and many other false god worships, and to the debasement of the feminine. At least the righteous daughters are not seen as being part of the Godhead. And so here we have this Shushan gate, the Lilie gate, that's daubed up, walled up, which is what Solomon did as king. When he began to marry these daughters from the surrounding whore nations, he began to put them in charge of the doctrine, which is called the waters, the pools, which is also representative of Zion and Jerusalem, and talking about the law and from whence it issues from. So he put his whore wives in charge of this doctrine, and eventually they put the men in charge of it. That was the promise of this covenant made between the first Adam and that whore spirit Lucifer, that was made between the two, with him setting out the righteous spirit. Okay? And that's why we have two women in view as two covenants, because you have the whore spirit and you have the righteous spirit that was rejected. And it's the righteous spirit's principles of truth, life, and love that makes us acceptable in the new body. And so she has to come into existence. And what it looks like, when I said in the last video, it looks like the great shaking takes place. And we're provided a way physically to actually march back to Zion, to Israel, and take it back. And I believe these 144,000 daughters is literally going to march through this gate. It seems to be our departure gate. Once we hit that departure gate, we rise up. That's what it looks like. This is our departure gate. That's why they've walled it up. They've daubed it up. They don't want the righteous daughters walking through it, which is represented by this 144,000 daughters of Zion. We've proved that that's who they are for anybody with eyes to see and ears to hear with. We've proved our point. We've made our case. You either receive it or you don't. But it looks like we literally physical, and we've talked about rituals and how they play out in scriptures quite a bit. And I'll cite two right quickly here. One was when Moses struck the rock the second time, when he was to speak kindly to it. And the Spirit, or God, was really upset with Moses and said, because of what you have done, you will not enter into the land. Because when Moses struck the rock, what it told us was that the nation of Israel was literally gonna reject their God. They were gonna strike their God, in a sense, and say, we don't want you. They were gonna strike her down and say, we don't want you. And we actually get a physical show of that in Lamentations 2:1, and in where's the other passage? It was just there on the tip of my tongue. Isaiah 22. When the spirit Adonai, and I do believe it's Adonai speaking, she says, what are you doing? Why have you gone up on your rooftops to worship the hosts of heaven? I've kept you safe. I have kept you protected. None of you have died by the sword in battle. None of you. And if you go to Lamentations 2:1, we're shown there that when man rejected the glory, the true righteousness, this true spirit of righteousness, which is represented by the daughter, that she literally received a physical casting down from the heavens. The second heaven is what it looks like. And she was physically cast down to bear the sins of Israel. And that's what we've been expressing in these videos. And I don't say that the theology is easy to pick up. I think it's going to be a lot easier for the 144,000 to pick this theology up than for anyone else. And there's going to be a lot out there that's going to rail hard against it. And I'm not going to argue with you. I know I've been led by the Spirit, and that's not up for debate with me. I put full confidence in Yahweh. I put full confidence in the Spirit that has led me to these deeper truths, which was promised to anyone who would place their faith in wisdom, which is the Spirit. She's identified as the Spirit in Proverbs 1. She's identified as the principle, the beginning, the first fruits, the chief one. And once you find her, you find life. So that's what it looks like with this Golden Gate. And we discussed how it looks like we're going to actually physically march back in a way that I don't fully understand. We're going to be empowered in some way, and we know that that's through the Spirit, which I find very curious, because I'm wondering, well, how are we going to manifest our power? And of course, I have had a couple of visions and a few dreams that has alluded to this that are personal to me, and so I won't share them for that reason. But I think if you're one of these daughters of Zion, I think you truly know that you've been called to do this. You've been possibly led on your own searches in the scriptures to this effect. And what it looks like is this is a ritual that literally has to play out, whereupon we literally rise up into the second heaven and cast our enemy down out of the midst of the body, which is represented by the second heaven. And we discussed all of that. It's all allegorical, of course. And so these daughters has got to march through, undaub that wall. And they're going to march through that. And it looks like it's our departure gate. And as we return back, we gather, we're appointed the judgment. And we discuss some of that. You need to look into that for yourself. Get down on your knees. Let the Spirit of truth lead you into all truth. And you'll be surprised what the Spirit will show you. So this Golden Gate is absolutely interesting for anybody who has any inkling about this covenant of the lilies, and where you find it, and how it links back to the she-goat in the Abrahamic Sarah covenant, and how really all those references further reference you to the Psalms of Asaph, which Asaph means gatherer. And from there, I'll link you to the Psalm of Degrees and our slow return back to the true God, which makes us acceptable in the new body, which is the new heavens, which is established by Christ. And the new principles that makes us acceptable unto God is established by the Spirit. Like I said, Christ says you can get away with blaspheming the Son of Man, and it will be forgiven you, but you won't blaspheme the Holy Spirit, because it's her principles that sanctifies the body that makes us acceptable unto God. So there's a new heaven waiting for us. And in order to be received into the new heaven, into the new body, the new Spirit and her truth must be received. And so we're going to march. We're going to undaub that wall. Now, beyond that, I'm not sure what takes place. I don't think this fallen Adam receives us. We're rejected by that. The temple being established and Satan's cast down, and woe to the inhabitants of earth, it says at the 3.5 mark. Satan has come down to you, and woe, she's mad, he's mad, and marches into that temple, which represents the body of the first Adam. So this is really ritualistic, where they're trying to draw power. We discussed about the ritual. Oh yeah, I didn't finish up on Moses. We talked about 2 rituals that we could show you quite quickly, and one was where Moses struck the rock. Well, it told God, right, that God would be rejected, and that's what that ritual showed you. The temple is all about ritual, playing out ritual, and it's man-made ritual to empower man's teachings and the Holy Spirit's teachings. These are not God's law. God tells you, my law is you go out and you feed the people, you show love to the people. These were my commandments in the beginning, not the sacrifices of animals. Those are man-made. And so one of the other rituals that we could quickly speak on would be where Jeremiah instructs the scribe to read all the words on the scroll, and after he's done, to wrap it with a stone and throw it in the rivers Euphrates, and say, as this scroll sinks, as this stone sinks, so will Babylon. So you see the power of ritual in the scriptures. It's not witchcraft. This is the power of God. We're empowered by the power of God. We're not empowered by the horror spirit that witches and wizards, and witches and wizards are the same. Wizards aren't better than a witch. They're the same thing. They're just a male witch. But this world likes to put all the blame on witches. Well, a wizard is a witch. But those are rituals that gets played out. So that's a brief summary of the covenant of lilies and how important they play into the end of days. And for the daughters of Zion, who are these lilies that's in view, I think this theology is going to be a lot easier for you to adapt to understand, because I think you've been appointed to it and you're going to understand it much quicker than anyone else will, and probably you've been led on these paths already yourself. So I would encourage you to go look into this covenant as you're part of it. So love to you. I just thought it wasn't recording there for a minute, but I guess it is. So love to anyone who is a saint of God. I mean, no disrespect to any of you, but I do know what the Spirit has shown me. I'm not going to debate this theology. It answers all of the questions of theology, at least up until the point that I've studied to, whereas current theology leaves great big holes and pockets. And so I hope this series of 13 videos helps anyone out there who's searching or who feels that they are indeed a part of this. When the great shaking takes place and we possibly still find ourselves here, I'll admit I don't want to be here. I want to leave in the rapture. I want to be gone. But it does look like it's 3.5 years that we are birthing the Spirit of Truth, as it's called, and this great shaking shows the birthing of it in a way, and the land mass is coming together, and we discussed that in the last video. So thanks for watching my videos. For anybody out there who did, for anybody who hasn't, I would encourage you to watch the very first video start from the beginning and go to the very end, and pick up the threads that the Spirit allows you to pick up. And may the Lord bless you, and have a good day.